For 5 years, I tried. And what I did during those 5 years was just keep doing what I love to do, because it's what makes my heart sing. And then never stop working towards it. And eventually I got on the team, and in hindsight, all that time was, just right. I needed it to be where I should be to deserve that spot. But, you just keep doing what makes your heart sing and what you really love. And then that's when the universe kind of, I'd say, conspires to help you out.
Welcome to the Stokecast, where each week we bring you an inspiring athlete, adventurer, or entrepreneur and dig into their stories and strategies for balancing work, life, and adventure while having fun and making a difference. I'm Jonathan Ronzio.
And I'm Emily Holland. Thanks for joining us today.
Let's get to it. That was Kit Deslauriers. She's our guest today. Really rad, inspiring person. She's actually the first person in the world to have skied off the top of the 7 summits. Absolutely crazy feat. And that's the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents, in case you didn't know that or didn't catch that in our episode with Colin back in 2013. But she completed that on, I think, October 18th, 2006 with her her descent off of Everest. And beyond that, Kit does a lot of work up in the Arctic and the Brooks Range of Alaska with the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And we'll get into all of that in this interview, but just an amazing person. She was actually even just a stonemason for 15 years or something before she became a professional skier?
Yeah, she's just kind of a badass woman who doesn't take any of the stereotypical things. She actually likes to reject that almost. I'm going to do what I want to do. It's amazing.
It is very cool.
She was very inspiring.
Well, I think one of the most inspiring pieces of this interview with Kit is that she didn't get into skiing until a little bit later in life, and then became obviously this the first person to ski off the 7 summits is this unbelievable claim to fame in the skiing community.
Seriously.
And to not have been a skier your whole life and do that is outrageous. And so she talks about the importance of drive, determination, of passion, and of dreaming, and of letting yourself dream big and dream the impossible, and letting that, as you put often, simmer until you're ready with it, right?
For someone who doesn't know how to cook, really, I use a lot of cooking metaphors. Yeah, but I the simmer aspect, when she was talking about it, I kind of thought to myself, this is something that I have, where she talks about these, she has these lofty goals and she thinks about them and she mulls them over for a while, and then she starts to lay the groundwork for what that would look like. And I think that everyone should have something like that, where it's a really scary goal, but you're kind of in the back of your head, you're always thinking, okay, that could be the real deal for sure. I don't know. I have a couple of those that I think about. I'm not going to drop them on a Stokecast right now, but I have them in the back of my mind, and kind of when I'm in training or thinking about my workouts, I start to think about them when I'm feeling unmotivated.
Yeah, and you won't drop just one.
I won't drop any. There's no way. I'm not going to drop it. No, and if you listen to Kit, she's adamant against that. So I'm going to listen to her advice on this one.
Oh, man.
But I encourage everyone else to think about those, because if you don't have one, I feel what's really pushing you and driving you forward if you don't have that big, scary goal?
See, I am often on the other side of the coin. I totally respect that and understand that, and probably should do more of that. I should keep more things to myself.
Yeah, shut up, man. We're on an interview format, so I think we can talk a little.
No, I just I guess I've gotten in the routine and the belief that in order for me to make something happen, I have to tell the world. I have to if I have this big crazy dream or idea, I need to put it out there to start getting that feedback. Whether it's for a big adventure idea or a business concept or whatever, I want immediate feedback so that I know myself, is this something, are other people validating this? Is it a good idea? Are they calling me crazy? Is it the good kind of crazy that I can run with? And so I like to put it out there and kind of hold myself accountable. And obviously, I might say some things that I don't end up following through with, which is always a bummer, but I guess I've just come to terms with that, and I generally try to at least attempt something, right?
Yeah. I generally don't tell anyone my big goals unless it's Andrew, generally, and some of them he doesn't even know, or my whiteboard. Those are the only two places.
Andrew is the boyfriend, listeners?
Yes. Oh, he's very famous on this podcast already. His name gets dropped a little bit. But yeah, I don't really like let anyone know because I kind of like when someone doesn't, or people don't expect you to do something, but then you do it and they figure out that you've done it or something. I kind of like that, like, oh my God, that's amazing that you did that. I kind of like that little reaction because it makes you feel like, yeah, damn right I did it. Like, I can do anything. So that's what I got from this interview with Kit, that I can do anything.
Emily can do anything, and so can you. So really, this is an awesome interview. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Please, let us know what you think, what you're inspired to do, or don't, I guess. Don't let us know.
Yeah, well, let us know if you have a big goal, but you don't have to tell us what it is.
Yeah, don't tell us what it is, but let us know what you took away from the show. All right, enjoy the interview with Kit Deslauriers. All right, we're on the Stokecast tonight with Kit Deslauriers. How are you doing, Kit?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you, Jonathan?
Fantastic. I'm here with Emily. We're in Boston.
Hello. I have to chime in sometimes.
Yep.
Jackson, Wyoming.
Yeah, I know you're out in Jackson. Pretty jealous. I absolutely love it out there. I was telling you a little bit before we got into the show, but man, my first experience in Jackson back in like 2011, it was like I was standing in line behind one of the Jackson Air Force guys in the tram, and I just recognized the patch, and then like went up and followed him and saw him go out the backcountry gate into Cody, and then like and saw him like launch this 40-foot cliff, and it blew my mind. And then 7 days later, with just epic snow conditions, I launched the same cliff. And that's what I always think back about. Like, that's the caliber that Jackson breeds, is when you were in Jackson, even for a week, if not your life. That is why everybody is so rad and amazing in Jackson. It just pushes you to be better.
Yes, for sure. It's infectious. I'll never forget the day I got tapped on the shoulder in tramline and handed my Air Force patch.
That's amazing. So let's talk about that day then, and leading up to that day. When did you actually get out there?
When did I move here?
Yeah, when did you move to Jackson?
I moved here a long time ago, winter 99, 2000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was actually living in Victor, Idaho that winter, but that was the first winter I had a pass here in Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. And it's funny because I actually skied the first 3 weeks, I'd say, without ever skiing a run inbounds, because it was the first year, I believe, that those side country gates you just referenced were open legally.
Yep.
And I mean, I moved here and I just saw people going out there, and those are the folks I met and those are the folks I skied with. And like 3 weeks into it, my parents came to visit and they wanted me to show them around the mountain. And I'm like, I have not skied a single run inbounds. I'm not sure. We'll figure it out together.
And just for effort of being inclusive, so for those who are not skiers or don't know what you guys are talking about, inbounds versus outbounds and the Air Force patch, what does that look like?
Well, ski areas legally have boundaries, and I mean, it's for good reason. People who don't know where they're going, it's a consistent and really sad experience almost once a year probably around here, where people exit these side country gates and they don't know where they're going, and they do get caught on these kinds of cliffs or even bigger ones than Jonathan said, and lost and spend the night out and sometimes fall to their death. So it's to be done with total caution. But here at Jackson Hole Mountain Resort for the last 18, 19 years, it's been legal to exit the ski area boundary. So you're on your own. The area is not patrolled. It's not controlled for any snow safety mitigation. There's no, regular rescue that you can expect like you would inbounds by ski patrol. But it's really just natural terrain that's available outside the ski area boundary. So that's what we call out of bounds or side country.
Cool. All right, taking that off the list of definitions.
And the other question from Emily was the Air Force.
Yeah. So when you come here, you can hire a guide and do it and legally and safely if you don't know where you're going. The other question is the Air Force, which is just a completely on the DL, or used to be more on the DL until there was a book and a movie done about it. But a group of folks here in Jackson, just intense hardcore skiers from the days before those gates were open, who would just go ski what they wanted to ski when they wanted to ski it, with really good style, usually big lines like we're talking about. So plenty of air, lots of powder. And it was one of those things where people wouldn't see them. You would just duck the ropes, and nobody could necessarily catch them either. So, that's this backstory of Jackson Hole Air Force. And it still exists, but it's always been a real quiet thing. It's nothing that anybody can get into when they want to. So for me, the day that it happened, I remember I was competing on the free skiing tour that year, and I happened to be home in between events, and I was just out skiing. And so I would just kind of do whatever, I was in competition prep mode. So I was hitting those cliffs and skiing really fast, and just met up with some local people, and I'd be like, yeah, hey, I'll go do that. And after 3 or 4 of those lines, one of the Air Force guys just tapped me on the shoulder in the tram line, like when one of those kind of semi-chaotic moments, right, when you're grabbing your skis and about to load up the tram, and handed me this patch. And it was so quick and surreal, and there was no real moment to talk about what was going on. And that's the way that it's intended to be.
Did that person just disappear as like they're a mirage? That's what I'm envisioning.
Yeah. Except we kept skiing together. It was more just like we were 2 people in an ad hoc group who were just out doing what we love to do.
Oh, that's super cool.
So there were no real need for words.
Yeah, it's a cool vibe there, right? So, the movie you need to watch, and anybody listening, the movie you need to watch is called Swift, Silent, Deep, and it's a fantastic story of the J-Hole Air Force. That'll give you the backstory. We don't need to go too much deeper into it. We'll keep it at a level of mystique for now, but that is so cool, Kit.
My husband had lived here longer than me, and I came home with my patch. He's like, what? Where's mine? He ended up getting it a couple of years later, but it does have that level of mystique.
Yeah.
It's healthy competition between partners. I like it.
Right. No, that's cool. So
yes, he was looking that day.
So you moved out to Jackson Hole. You said 99, 2000, and you were just basically your life was skiing at that point, right? And
my life has been skiing since I decided to make it my focus. It obviously hasn't always been skiing, and I actually didn't grow up alpine skiing. So every step I've taken along the way is leading me to where I am now, and I know there's still many more steps to take. It's such a journey. When I moved here, I had skied a lot in Telluride, and I was on the ski patrol for a couple seasons as a rookie, and I volunteered on search and rescue. But my work there mostly was as a stonemason. And then in the winter, I would tune skis in the local ski shop, or sometimes lay tile or carpet to pay the bills, basically things that I could do that would still allow me the freedom during my days to ski in the winter. And then I worked super hard in the summer as a stonemason. Also, again, setting my own schedule so I could go, run around in the mountains as much as possible. But really, it was intense work from May through November so that I could ski more and more. And I volunteered for search and rescue, like I said, and I was a wilderness first responder and then a wilderness EMT. And those kinds of training eventually got me invited on my first international ski expedition and to Sikkim, India. First I went to Sikkim, India. That was not a ski expedition. That was just a climbing one. And then the next year I went to Siberia on my first ski expedition. And that was where I met my husband, Rob. And this is where he lived up here in the Tetons. So one of us was going to move one place or the other, and he had a better paying job than I did, so I said I'd move up here, and here I've been.
So your first ski expedition was in Siberia?
It was.
How did that come to be?
It was my first ski expedition, and it was to the highest mountain in Siberia, which is Mount Beluga. It's on the border of China and Mongolia and Kazakhstan. It's a very, very cold place. We were in March of 99, and it happened because I had been on this expedition the year before to go climb a mountain in Sikkim, India, and it was a very beautiful mountain. However, it was a pure alpine climb, and I was just at this real formative time in my life where I was like, heck yeah, you're going to invite me on this trip, and I'll go. And I got there and I honestly wasn't really truthfully happy. I realized that I missed my skis. I looked around at all these mountains and I'm like, first of all, how do we decide to climb any one of these? They're all so strikingly beautiful. And second of all, why don't I have my skis with me? Because we could go do that one while we're, acclimatizing, and then we could go do that one. And I was the only one on the trip, though, that really kind of felt strongly like that. So it was an interesting sensation to sit with. And at the end of that trip, I shared that feeling with a friend, and he was like, well, let's do a ski trip next year. I've always wanted to go to this place called in the Altai Mountains, and that's how we picked Mount Palukka in Siberia.
Wow.
That's so cool. I mean, so anybody who goes and climbs a mountain and then skis or rides down and even uses skis or a split board to access the mountain, like once you do that once, you will never look at like lower glaciated terrain or like descending from the summit the same as you'll be like, no, I'm totally skiing this every single time. What are you talking about walking?
It's true. It's true. And so that's been my focus since. And I do still love to climb purely for the love of climbing. It's just that whenever possible, I'm choosing to ski. So in the winter, it's almost exclusively skiing, except for when I might be working on ice climbing a little bit, which I do really only so that I can climb bigger lines to ski them.
So how did this kind of, I guess the journey started, far before the Seven Summits push, but, how did it lead up to there? You said there's so many steps and formative moments that you were having and so many more to have where you're continuing to evolve your skiing and therefore your well-rounded athleticism. But I mean, what was the time from, I guess, Siberia to, okay, I want to try to ski all 7 summits? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, well, for anybody who wants to know more than we have time to share here, I did write a book about it all, and it's called Higher Love, Skiing the 7 Summits, and it's been out for a few years now. So there's more backstory there than I can share here, but the quick...
Now, we'll definitely link that in the show notes. Yeah. Higher Love, check that out.
The quick summary is that you heard me say that I moved to Jackson to be with my then fiance, Rob Deslauriers, and that was the winter 99-2000. And he was embarking on a kind of a career shift himself. He'd been a professional athlete on the North Face ski team and not really ski mountaineering, more Warren Miller films, cliff jumping. And anyway, he also has a degree in hotel management from Cornell, and he'd met somebody in his ski career. He'd actually coached somebody in one of his ski camps who wanted him to, basically develop a piece of property for this individual into a hotel at the base of Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. And so Rob had pushed that off as long as he could, and eventually he took him up on the job. So that was not long after. It was actually probably about the same day we got engaged that he agreed to do that. So those next 3 years or so, we spent here working really hard, and I tried to help him as much as I could. I actually worked in his office a little bit, but it doesn't suit me very well, that style of work. I'm more like, building stone walls and stuff. You see results right away. So I'd hit this phone call list form of things to be done and then sit there and tap my fingers waiting for the answers to come back.
You're like, there's no rock wall yet. What's going on?
I'm not that good, right? So, but that's what it was like for a few years in there while he was building a Teton Mountain Lodge. And that was just so all hands on deck and literally, working for equity kind of thing where we were super poor. And so very little skiing except that which we could do right around here. So, I was really exploring my own skiing potential by meeting people and skiing around here. Sadly, not skiing with Rob as much as I wanted to because he was working so hard. And then when that hotel got finished, we took off on a ski trip. He said, "Where do you want to go?" So you've been, helping me out for so long now. And so in November of 2003, I think it was, we went to Mount Aspiring in New Zealand, which is where I wanted to go. And I joked that I aspire to ski Mount Aspiring. And
it's an incredible mountain.
It's perfect.
So beautiful. The Matterhorn of the South, they call it.
Totally.
So we climbed and skied that, and then we were successful at it. And, if you remember, we met on that ski expedition to Siberia. So that's what we always love to do. And then the next year he picked Denali. We were kind of doing one of those things where let's keep, supporting each other on our dreams anytime we have a chance to take a trip. So he picked Denali the next spring, the next May, when it was a good time for him to take a break from work. And then it was after that. And then I decided to compete on the free skiing tour in 2004. And then that was where I met Dick Bass, who was the first person to climb the 7 summits. And I won the U.S. Free Skiing Nationals at Snowbird and had the opportunity to have dinner with, Rob and I did, with Dick Bass. And he gave me a signed copy of his book, 7 Summits. And so when I read that, I thought, oh, well, maybe I can ski those. And that's when I started on that project.
But nobody had yet. So I want to figure out what it is.
Mindset.
Yeah, within you and within your mind that you said there was a point where you decided to focus on skiing as your career, and it hadn't always been that, but there was a point in which your focus kind of changed and shifted and narrowed and dialed in. And what was the inspiration, the catalyst? Was there a role model? Was that, because here you are sitting with Dick Bass and you saw his book and you're like, nobody has ever done this now, but I'm going to maybe go for it. I'm just kind of drawing a parallel between the two of those and wondering what that is within you.
That's hard to pinpoint. Hopefully I'll try not to use a bunch of different cliches, but I'm a seeker. And it's that way, in my personal life. It's that way in my professional life. I'm really into challenges. When I became a stonemason, you can imagine there weren't a lot of female stonemason role models around either. But that's what I did professionally for 12 years. I guess there's a piece of me that always thrives on being something other than what the mainstream would expect, But I guess I went to school and I graduated from university, and I graduated with very close to a perfect GPA, and school academia just came easily to me. And I thought, I just would like to do something different. And I've always thought someday I will return to academia, but I wanted to live my life in a different way. I wanted to explore that artistic side of myself as a stonemason. And I love being in the mountains, and that's my happy, completely centered place where my mind is not off, making the grocery list and whatever else we always have flying through our heads. I think of that now because I'm a mother of a 9 and 10-year-old. But so for me, it's being in the mountains is a really calm place for me, where I feel like I am probably the best representation that so far I've found of myself in this lifetime. And, there's this thing in Buddhism where when you meet with a lama and they touch foreheads. And I've given it a lot of thought. I haven't actually asked a lama about this, but my inclination on that is, that forehead, that spot above your eyes there is this high point, right? It's this connection to a high spiritual place. And for me, going up high in the mountains, especially to the summit of the mountain if possible, is that same kind of connection. It's that place between heaven and earth. And it's that place, it's that highest place that we can get. And I just love being up there, or the journey to get up there, and the experience turned around, facing out, skiing back down. So for me, it's about challenges as well as the actual moment and the experience of it.
Wow. That was beautifully said. The spiritual nature of the high point is incredible. And so you're not only the first, woman to do this, but you're the first person to do this. So in going through that, obviously you had started with your husband doing those kind of trips one-off, this year, that year. You do this, I'll support you on this, I'll support you on this next one, what have you. So how did that evolve to, okay, Kit's, this is going to be her thing, if you will, and how did that work with the balance of the relationship and the partnership as well?
Well, like I mentioned, he was deep into this aspect of his work life, and he was loving climbing and skiing still. He still does. But at the level that I was finding myself moving into was perhaps a level that he had just moved out of. You know, it was different because, like I already explained, his particular niche was slightly different than mine. But so when I was getting into this, like when we did Denali together, which of course is one of the 7 summits, it was before I had this project of skiing the 7 summits. And I was competing on the free skiing tour because I wanted to really find something that would push my skiing to another level. You know, here in the Teton, like I moved here and I looked up and I saw the Grand and I'm like, oh, I want to ski that. And Pop's like, really? Like that's kind of a big deal. And that's like a ski mountaineering objective. And I said, yeah, I do. So I just quietly set myself that as a goal. In the next 3 years, I just did incrementally difficult, backcountry ski missions and ski mountaineering missions until I felt ready to go for that. So it was kind of similar, like when we did Denali and then I was pushing myself on the free skiing tour because I didn't actually learn how to alpine ski as what I'd call an expert until I was somewhere in my 20s or late 20s even. I don't even know if looking back I'd call myself an expert by the time we went to Beluga 20 years ago. It takes a long time to honestly become an expert at anything, but especially something like that. So I did the free skiing tour in 2004 and 2005. And when I met Dick Bass and I read this book, that was like the same trajectory that he'd had with climbing the 7 summits, is he'd done Denali as a one-off. And so when I read that, I let myself dream that in a place that was really difficult to acknowledge because of the magnitude of the scale of what I was picturing doing and because nobody had done it yet and the cost and everything else. Anyway, I sat with it and I really didn't tell anybody, I didn't tell Rob. And then that spring I was actually supposed to be going, I was in my second year of deferring my master's in landscape design enrollment really in the Conway School of Landscape Design in Western Massachusetts. And that was what I thought I wanted to do as my next evolution of my stonemasonry, is design these beautiful outdoor spaces to get people, using their outdoor spaces more. And I was into, real organic stone, dry stack stone walls and stuff. Anyway, I had this internal dilemma really of, am I going to accept it? Am I going to basically move to Massachusetts for the better part of 2 years and go to grad school, or am I going to keep skiing? And I literally called up a woman here in Jackson who is a soul reader. And I had never done anything like that before. And I went to meet with her, and she asked me all these questions that were so powerful. They just reduced me to tears right then and there. And I kept trying to push away the real answer that I knew in my mind. And she was able to coax it out of me. It was a really amazing moment. And at that point, I realized that I needed to do what I was feeling called to do, which was to at least try to climb and ski the remaining 6 of the 7 summits that I hadn't done yet. So that was when I set about in earnest. And at that point, that meeting with her was probably May of 2005. And I started on the project in earnest and right then in June 2006.
Wow. So there's something to be said, because we've had a couple people on the podcast talk about how saying a goal out loud is helpful for, accountability's sake, or just making it more real to themselves. And we've had a few people say their goals out loud. But I think there's something to also be said to that kind of ruminating and letting it simmer on your own before you even tell your partner or, your close friends and family about the somewhat crazily audacious goals that you have. Yeah. Right. And I think that's really powerful and a really good reminder that you can just sit with it. If it sticks with you and it keeps, nipping at you and making you feel excited and full of stoke, to use the name of our podcast.
Yes, if you can't
not think about it. I actually have this piece of advice. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying I have a really strong opinion on that, actually, in that if you do speak about it too soon or certainly too much, the energy dissipates and you likely won't achieve it. And I've actually practiced that experiment on myself quite a bit. And I believe firmly in that, at least for my own self. So if you're going to ask me what's next, I respectfully won't say.
Well, I appreciate that. And it comes back to this. It's not obviously the same, but I was young and I was going to get a tattoo for the first time. And the tattoo artist said this thing that like really affected me profoundly. And he probably didn't mean anything by it, but he was just like, I'm not going to give it to you. You're 18 years old. I'm not going to give you a tattoo right now. Why don't you wait 6 months? And if it's still the same thing you want, then I will absolutely do it for you. So I feel like it's a very similar parallel of like, if this is still something you want, you can make like little incremental steps towards it. And then it obviously is something that you should go for if it's still there. So my tattoo artist is really, he's like my life coach,
there
really.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, how many have you gotten with him?
Only the one. but it made me think, because there was many times during college after that I was like, I'm going to get a tattoo. And I would wait 6 months. I was like, I don't want that anymore. So that's a good lesson. But other things in my life, like goals I've wanted to achieve, have been the same way, where it's, I can't stop thinking about it. I need to put in steps to do it. So it's more of a life session for me.
And then, everybody knows the various different sayings that, you have this one precious life, don't waste it. So, I mean, if you have something that you feel really called to do, then what else are we here for than to do what I'll say just makes your heart sing? That's what people ask me. Like, how are you successful at this? And how did you get a job at that? And how'd you get on the North Face athlete team? Well, for 5 years I tried. And what I did during those 5 years was just keep doing what I love to do, because it's what makes my heart sing. And then never stop working towards it. And eventually I got on the team, and in hindsight, all that time was, just right. I needed it to be where I should be to deserve that spot. But, you just keep doing what makes your heart sing and what you really love. And then that's when the universe kind of, I'd say, conspires to help you out, or lets you know it's time to get that tattoo.
I'll get another one someday.
I don't have one yet, actually.
Well, we can get one together, Kit. It's okay.
Imagine. My dad was the Coast Guard, and he said he always regretted his tattoo. So I've been given an extra thought every single time I want one.
Yeah, I've drawn one up, but it's sat in my drawer next to my bed for like the last 8 years, and I still haven't done it. So I don't know if I will, but I have the one that I would if I ever did.
Okay. Do you want to tell us what it is? Is that you're looking at me?
No.
Don't spoil it if you don't want to spoil it. That's okay.
I'll say it. I mean, it's like basically it's a cloud with mountain peaks coming out of the cloud and a sunrise coming over the peaks, and it's like a very simplistic design that you can see all that through. But to me, it means the most dramatic, inspiring moment for me always is when I'm climbing through the night up a giant mountain, and then the sun rises over a sea of clouds, and I'm near the summit, and that's the moment that means the most to me in the mountains. So that's the tattoo if I ever got one.
All right,
that's awesome.
Let's draw it. Let's do it. Let's make the
right. Kit, how different would your life have been if you moved to Massachusetts?
Wow. Very different. Well, I would have been moving right back here because this was already my home. But I think about that with some regularity, actually. Jonathan, that's crazy. That's, yeah. I love my lifestyle. I am really suited to the kind of intense bursts that I have to go through, whether it's, focusing on work or travel or training or checking out of it all and parenting. It suits me much better than keeping a regular schedule. So obviously it would have been different, but I honestly don't think I would have actually followed through with it for one reason or another would have gotten in the way.
That makes sense. Well, all right. So now 2004, 2005, you win the free skiing championship back to back. And then 2006, isn't that when you completed the 7 summits and that's when you skied off Everest?
Mm-hmm. It is.
So, can you just describe that moment of strapping in on top of Everest?
Yeah, a lot happened in those couple years. And that moment was so full of emotion. I literally felt like I was going to cry. And when I look back at the video, that's actually what I said. I said, I think I'm going to cry. And the feeling that I had was really one of intense gratitude. That's what I remember. I wasn't afraid of anything. I wasn't, I didn't know how it was going to work out. Obviously, we'd climbed through some tricky sections and some sketchy snow, and there's so many unknowns anytime you're in a situation like that, much less, on the highest mountain in the world. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was so completely in the moment and so full of gratitude for every person and everything that came into my life to add to me being in that place. It was amazing. It was the best. And then it quickly turned among the most scary afterwards, which I wrote about, like with running out of oxygen and all sorts of stuff. But then we were able to spend a second unplanned night, or an unplanned night, which was our second night at 26,000 feet at the South Col. And then we skied the Lhotse face the next day. So it was just incredible. It was a line that is still 12 years ago. We skied it and it's still unrepeated, direct down the Lhotse face from Camp 4.
That's so wild. Two nights in the death zone, huh?
Yes, 2 nights in the death zone with little food or water. Yeah. And then like a 50-degree plus ski descent for over 5,000 vertical feet right in front of us, where it was just Rob and Jimmy Chin and I, and, not even a rope. There was no way that we could have rescued any one of us if anything happened. It was kind of like, I don't know if you've gotten to see Alex Honnold's film Free Solo yet.
Literally yesterday.
I went to see it last week. I went on a solo date. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? I'm glad it's out, because then I can say, like, if you've seen that's how much we were hanging it out there on that ski descent. But I definitely don't climb at that level.
Yeah, I couldn't handle that. Obviously we know the outcome too from that movie, and I was still like, oh my God, what is happening?
Yeah, right. You know he makes it, but the whole time you're just on the edge, man. That was a really, really amazing film. Mind-blowing feat. Yeah, totally.
Wow. So you come back from that, and many times we've heard from other guests on here, or just people that were following along their journeys, is there's kind of this lull or low after you complete something like that. So when you were getting back home and you were kind of coming off of that high, no pun intended, what was that like in getting back to, okay, just I love this and I'm going to continue moving forward? Was the passion still very much there, or was there kind of a period that you needed to slowly get back into it?
Well, the passion was still very much there, but it was an interesting thing. You touch on like the lull or the low, and I felt it a little bit. I actually went through like a physical illness walking out of base camp, which I think was just the intense mental, not even so much the physical. I really think it was the mental exertion of everything that I put into that, because skiing Everest was the last of my 7 summits to do. So that was just like, it was the hardest just to stay in the moment, for that long and like be focused on the journey instead of the outcome, because that just would have torn me up. But, when people would ask me afterwards, what's next and what's next, I felt like this like, I don't know, a little bit of angst, like rise in my belly about that, and go, can't I just be where I am right now? Can I just let this one sit? And it wasn't that I was feeling a low, it was that I was just feeling this intense desire to be in the moment. And it's real interesting. I think that Alex Honnold is doing something similar right now. Granted, he is completely on film tour, but that's kind of how he's feeling about his climbing since he accomplished that. It's not that he's not going to pull out some other amazing incarnations of his career. It's that he really is where he is right now. And I think that, I've reflected upon that a lot, and I've practiced a lot of mindfulness in my life. I'm on a bit of a mindfulness journey right now, for sure. I'm loving it. And I think that when we were able to ski Everest, I felt the greatest level of impermanence that I've ever felt in my life. It was certainly the greatest risk I'd ever taken and the greatest level of impermanence. And I think that also contributes to then this desire to be in the moment. And, that's really where we need to be living to be happy. And when we're constantly like in search of what's next, that's like the depressing aspect almost of being a powder skier, right? Or like any kind of adventurer where you always are, what's next? It's like just learning to be where you are and enjoying where you are is really where life is at. So I was feeling that intensely for quite a while, for a few months. And I also had another layer in that I wasn't sure I wanted to have a family, even though Rob had patiently been married to me for like 8 years at that point. We had our 8-year anniversary at base camp. And he really did want kids. And when we were on the mountain, I had this moment, and we had lots of time to sit and meditate, have these moments of clarity. We had days upon days of waiting for weather and whatnot and acclimatizing. And I thought, okay, if I get off this mountain alive, I will try and be less selfish, and I'll become a mother. We can have kids. And he was pretty excited. He's like, oh, should we just go home and start trying right now?
Like, no, I have to finish this first.
Yeah, let's be in the moment. This is what we're doing right now. So when we came back, I got cold feet on that whole idea for a couple of months. And then I found myself off on tour, with the North Face and doing speaker series. And in my reflection on that, it's that same thing of like being in the moment. I wasn't really happy living this past accomplishment. And I just kind of wanted to be like in the moment. And I was like, I've been traveling 7 months out of the year. And so now to just keep doing that and then actually not doing what I'm doing, what I love to do, but to be talking about it, I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's have kids. So we intentionally conceived our first daughter, Grace, that spring of, I guess it was 2007. She was born in December of 2007. I did go off on a ski trip on a little expedition that spring to Alaska, to Prince William Sound, and it was one that I organized and got funded and supported through the North Face, where we did a bunch of really cool ski descents accessed by a boat, which had been a long time dream of mine. And that was where I was able to confirm actually that I was pregnant with Grace. And then that was my next journey, but I mean, I still kept skiing. I skied 9 days after I gave birth to Grace, because I can't imagine a Christmas going by without skiing. So I keep doing what I love to do. It just was like, it just took some adjustment, and being a parent has, it's brought a whole new like level of egolessness and purpose to what I do.
Well, but also, I mean, now you are a mother, and like, how does that play into your life as an adventurer? Because that hasn't changed. You're still an adventure skier, and you're still going off and doing incredible expeditions and skiing. Like, how has that dynamic changed, or how do you kind of like balance your life as a wife and mother with the professional pursuits?
Well, nothing's perfect, and balance is this elusive thing, as you know, if you've ever like, I don't know. Are you a surfer?
I surf sometimes. I try.
That's very right. The balance of it. Inevitably, you fall off.
Yep.
The wave ends, but so it changes a lot. And I'll just say right now, I spend a lot less time, doing what I have done, professionally, and for my greatest love of pursuit of being in the mountains, because I do want to be with my children a lot, and I waited long enough to have kids where I don't want to be gone from them all the time. But it's always changing. Like at first, so Grace was born in December of 2007, and I decided to climb and ski the Grand as my recovery from my postpartum recovery. That was 6 months later. I really got back into it, but honestly, it took me the first 3 or 4 months before I even knew if I wanted to go do something like that again. I mean, I was out like charging powder laps that winter because I live right here, so it was easy enough to get out for short stints. But then I really knew that spring that I wanted to get back into it. And that was the first time I was able to climb and ski the Grand in a day because I had to. So I'm thankful for the push to be more disciplined with my time even. And then intentionally conceived our second daughter that same autumn. So they're only 18 months apart. So for the better part of 3 years there, I was real close to home. And, I just worked on what was meaningful to me. Like, how do I get my kids outside safely? And, I helped with the North Face to launch an infant and toddler clothing line since they didn't yet have one. And, I just kept looking at ways to keep myself valid in the industry and work in time whenever I could. But it wasn't very much time really out there until my second daughter when she was 9 months old. I left for my first trip to the Arctic Refuge. So I had basically a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old, and I took off for a 3-week expedition back to the Arctic. But by that point, I'd been 3 years into either, being pregnant or breastfeeding. And I realized that there was a piece of me that felt missing if I wasn't out there, like deep in the wilderness. So that was my first journey to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska.
Well, you just set the bar very high for expecting mothers. It's, have a baby and go climb the Grand and ski it in a day. No, that's amazing. And I love that you just brought up the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, because we definitely wanted to talk a little bit about your work there. I know you've done 5 expeditions to the refuge, 3 of them on skis, 1 recently. But over this time, we would love to hear a little bit about what inspired you so much about that place to get involved in protecting it and to work with, We Are the Arctic and everything that you're doing there.
Gosh, I was like 10 years old with I remember reading in the newspaper during some oil crisis about potential opening to drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And I've always been an avid reader, so me reading the newspaper at that level was like not unusual. Some people go, what? And anyway, it really, what my takeaway from that was, well, it doesn't matter that we're sitting here in 3-hour lines at the gas station and there might be oil under the ground there. If you really read what people have to say about this place, this is home to, this 130 or whatever, 150,000 head of caribou that live up there, that migrate up there, that this is their birthing place on the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge. And these other people, this is their home, Native American people, and this is what they live on is the caribou. And just a sense of grave injustice and a complete dichotomy of the two aspects of that conversation. It's like, we've got to find other places to fix this oil problem. This place is not the answer. That struck me when I was 10. And I've always had that place in the back of my mind. When I was 19, I went on a NOLS trip to Alaska. So I did a semester in Alaska that whole summer. And I was blown away by the wilderness up there. And I remember mentioning that to one of my instructors. And that instructor, he kind of sparked the Brooks Range again for me, because he said, oh, you think this is wild. You should go up to the Brooks Range. There's no roads, no trails, no bridges, no signs. It's total wilderness. The mountains aren't as big as, here. And in that moment, I was in the Talkeetnas. But they're incredibly wild and vast. And so these different little things have happened to me formatively in my life where I've had this place in the back of my mind. And then what happened was coming out of giving birth to these 2 beautiful little girls and wanting to go back on a big trip, I was like, I don't want to go back to the Himalaya right now. I don't want to go on a 7 or 8 or 9 week trip or even 5-week trip. I only want to be gone for 3 weeks at the most. And I want to find some place that's as deep and wild as I can possibly imagine, as close to home as I can possibly imagine. And of course, throw in some first ski descents and some maybe slightly unknown places or not well-known places. And so I started actually studying the Brooks Range, and for 3 months I was just reading. Literally, I would have a babysitter over to watch both kids, and I'd just go hole up in my office and just read accounts of early exploration in the Brooks Range. And I was really landing on gates of the Arctic until I saw some photos. And I'm like, oh, those aren't that skiable looking. And so I took this step back and I started looking at maps, and I realized that the highest mountains in the Brooks Range are just to the east of there in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And then I remembered these earlier conversations and, back when I was 10, and I was like, oh yeah, that's where I've always wanted to go. So I put together that trip in 2010 and led a team of North Face athletes. And we went up there, mostly women. Actually, Hillary O'Neill was on the trip. So I'm not completely out in left field as far as being a parent and a mother and still loving to get in the mountains. She did it about the same time as I did, if not several months earlier. So she was out there with a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old back home. And we made a first ski descent of Mount Isto, the highest mountain in the Arctic, in the U.S. Arctic. So that's the highest mountain in the Brooks Range. And skied several other really high peaks up there. And I just felt like recommitted, the place was so wild and so silent and so beautiful and so full of wildlife. And it just really, it energized me, and it energized me not only for me, but for the next generation. I found myself thinking that I couldn't wait to take my kids up there, even though they were, 9 months old and 2 years. I'm like, this kind of place needs to be preserved and protected for all the wildlife that lives there and for all future generations. And because there's really no other place in the United States of America that's quite like the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. It's 20 million acres of wilderness.
That's incredible. And it almost, not that it doesn't feel like it's the United States to us, lower 48ers, but it looks otherworldly almost, right? It doesn't feel, from our Northeast perspective,
no,
it's like, that doesn't feel like it's part of us, but it doesn't matter if it's part of us, really, we should protect it, but it's crazy to me that that's part of the United States.
It almost looks like Siberia now that you mention it. I was watching a 60 Minutes piece on that young woman who's the eagle hunter, in Mongolia. Yep. Well, she's from Oklahoma, but I was watching that and it struck me. I'm like, wow, this terrain looks kind of like the North Slope of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I went to flew to Alaska for Denali last summer, and I've been all over the world, but flying to Alaska felt just as much like going off the grid to another country. I remember leaving, I think I connected through Atlanta, and I texted my wife in Atlanta, all right, if I don't, if you don't hear from me when I land, and then I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to be in the United States. I should have service.
It feels that way, yeah. So you said, go ahead.
Yeah, that trip was in 2010, and I met this really amazing person named Dr. Matt Nolan, and he's a PhD glaciologist who at the time was working out of the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And he was flying into the refuge to do some of his ongoing glacier studies. And yes, it is a wilderness, but as the listeners may know, the Wilderness Act was passed in 1964. And so this particular research station that he has been continuing research on was started by some other glaciologists back in the late 50s, so it was grandfathered in. Anyway, he was going in there to do some of his ongoing research, and I met him, and I was quizzing him on, just always wanting to understand the environment that I'm moving in. I was like, what am I going to find up there? And he was basically saying, oh, well, the glaciers are melting. There will be no more glaciers in the U.S. Arctic in somewhere around 100 years. They'll just be, porcupine and caribou, I should say, not necessarily porcupine caribou, but caribou and butterflies. And it's not so much about the winters, it's about the summers being longer and warmer. So that was my quiz on him, and he was like, who are you? You're coming out here with 2 little kids at home and, a tribe of 5 other women, and you're going to go ski for 3 weeks, self-supported. So he kept in touch and asked me to come back a couple years later to help him with a summer glaciology program, and then things just kind of built. And I've gone back up there, several more times, including one time Rob did acquiesce and say we could take our kids, at which point they were 5 and 6. And we actually did a river trip, because that's a fairly benign way to move through the Arctic. I have not taken them up there on a ski expedition yet.
Wow. So what does the work look like when you do go up there and work with Dr. Nolan? Is it going into the wildlife refuge and trying to understand different patterns in there? What does that actually look like?
Well, the trip in 2012 was in August, and we based out of his research station on the glacier and did day trips to surrounding glaciers that are kind of difficult to get to. So you need to be a climber, really, to get there. So he set our small team up with some scientific ice radar survey tools. And we would go off on these day trips and cross these glaciers and climb up rock and down rock and access other glaciers and carry around this, an ice radar survey system that was mounted on several 30-meter sections of tubular webbing and had a computer strapped to my chest most of the time with a black trash bag over my head so I could get out of the glare and read the screen to see that this oscilloscope that we were trailing around attached to our harness was actually getting the measurements of the depth of the ice. And it did and it didn't. So our results were fairly inconclusive back in 2012. So he went off and got his pilot's license and devised a new system to measure the depth of ice with aerial photogrammetry, and really, but mostly not so much the depth of ice. That's not so possible with this aerial photogrammetry, but measures anything topographic. So if he's measuring ice, if he's measuring glaciers, he can do really frequent visits flying over them for very little cost and accurately map to within a decimeter of the other tested scientific methods, and measure the rates of glacial recession, basically. So that was what we went back in 2014 to do. So in that moment in 2014, I was not carrying a computer on my chest, thankfully, but I did have to carry this scientific grade differential GPS that was strapped to a mounted pole in my backpack and stop frequently to make measurements of the snow or ice level. And then he flew over almost simultaneously and took those same measurements with his new system and then crunched the data, and then took about a year and a half, if not more, to turn it into a peer-reviewed scientific journal paper, proving his methodology. And during that whole process, we measured what the highest mountains in the Arctic refuge actually are, the highest mountains in the Brooks Range, therefore. Because we had to measure something, and he let me pick what we were going to measure. So
that's awesome. I get so psyched on the blending of just adventure and science. Like it's just perfect. It's like who else is better poised to go assist these scientific projects than the people that are like willingly pushing themselves into the most extreme places on the planet.
I so agree. I mean, I wish that it was easier to find these opportunities that just perfectly meld like that. And in reality, I think they're few and far between, unless you maybe switch your focus and become a complete like adventure scientist, in which case then are you doing as much adventure of your sport that you want to? But anyway, it's, I'm constantly on the have my radar on for that melding, but it has to be really authentic. And that one just really was. And so I'm glad that we went for it and pushed through. And I'm glad that National Geographic recognized it, because they did give us an expedition grant to pull off that field science. So yeah, that was one of the more memorable expeditions in my life. Very rewarding.
And is that the same time, wasn't it? It was 2015. You got National Geographic Adventure of the Year, right? For that project, was it?
Right.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and to be fair, in that year they did like a top 10. They named 10 adventurers of the year, and then they have a people's choice for one adventure of the year. And I did not win one adventure of the year, but I was one of the 10. So I just say I was a National Geographic Adventure of the Year. But I'm also not just a big marketer, and I don't really care that I'm such an award to be, included among such cool people.
Totally. I mean, top 10 in that list is a pretty prestigious annual list.
Yes.
That's a heck of an achievement, and it's a very cool project. So very worthwhile. Where can listeners dig into more about the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, or learn more about your work there, or get involved? Well,
that's a great question. I do some volunteering for Alaska Wilderness League, And so AlaskaWildernessLeague.org is a great resource. At one point, they focused exclusively on Arctic refuge protection, and now it's about a number of other very worthwhile wilderness areas in Alaska. I have that paper. There's a link to that scientific paper if somebody's interested on my website, kitdeslauriers.com. And yeah, there's just where else to get involved. There's a lot of ways to get involved with Alaska wilderness, with the Arctic refuge. You can get some great backstory by going and checking out all these amazing PDFs that are basically years of science compiled on the Fish and Wildlife Service website for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. It's really an amazing place. And people should go check it out. It's not easy to get to. It's very expensive. It's far north. During the time when it's pretty hospitable to humans, it's also super hospitable to mosquitoes. And, so it's not a real easy place to go to. But if anybody has an inkling, I encourage it because it's life transformational. And also it's just to get to places like that is really when you want to preserve them, when you get to truly experience them.
Yeah, and speaking of experiencing them, so you did a recent project too with Protect Our Winters. I think it's called Hill to Hill. Can you tell us a little bit about what that project was like and how it kind of blended the two experiences that are basically necessary to help save our planet?
Well, I am seeing a lot of climate change evidence in my niche of skiing and ski mountaineering. And I mean, I'm 48 at this point. I've been doing this for quite a while, and I have definitely seen a lot of change, especially in the last 10 years. I see it here in the Tetons. I've seen it up in the Arctic. Just this year when I was up there with Hillary O'Neill, we went to ski a mountain, and it was just, it's a great story, but a sad story in that we had a hard time getting there with weather. And when we were actually able to get up high and see the view out north to the coastal plain, there's almost no snow on the coastal plain. Whereas in 2010, we skied across the coastal plain and had plenty of snow. And so talking to the local pilots and other people who make their living there, they're telling us about these changes in climate patterns. In weather patterns, which therefore becomes changing climate over time, where the storms are tracking differently. And so they're kind of bypassing that northern slope of the mountains up there in the Brooks Range. Well, anyway, that all leads me to Protect Our Winters, which is an organization that I volunteer with. I'm a member of their Riders Alliance. So I do different things for them. And this year I got to take part in this really cool project called Hill to Hill, which with Brody Levin, whom I understand was your very first guest on this podcast.
Sure was. Yeah. Episode 2 with Brody. That was great.
Super stoked guy for sure. It was the first time I got to do anything, measurable with him, but we had a blast. The two of us. The project was also with duct tape and beer, and we used Google virtual reality cameras to climb a line in the Ruby Mountains, really steep couloir called Terminal Cancer, and then ski back down, and then basically move to DC for part 2, where we met with the two congressmen from Florida, Congressman Carlos Curbelo and Ted Deutsch, who one's Republican and one's Democrat, but they came together to found the Climate Caucus to really just increase the bipartisan conversation about how climate change is affecting everybody. It's not, it's no longer this enigma we don't understand or that we debate whether it's actually the truth. It's flooding their cities in Florida, and it's changing the landscape in the mountain environments where Brody and I recreate. So we were there making this super cool piece that's out right now. I'm actually going to Boulder this week for an event where they'll be showing the VR. So I could just send you a link, but I don't think it's going to look very cool on the computer because it's one of those 3D things. You really want to put the virtual reality goggles on and see what it was like for us to climb and ski this line and then go talk with these guys about climate change. And the message truly is that your vote matters. Everybody's vote matters. And in the 2014 midterms, folks aged 18 to 29, only 16% of eligible voters voted in the 2014 midterms. So if we could all get out and really just stand up and take part in what's happening around us, it could make a really big difference. You know, this Dr. Matt Nolan, when I was first meeting with him up there on the McCall Glacier, he told me about some ice samples that he had taken, you know, where he'd drill down and take these cores out, and then he'd gone through this lengthy process to get them back to Fairbanks and then insulated still, and then shipped off someplace like Texas, I think, where they're in long-term storage and they're getting analyzed by the scientists who do this thing. And in those cores, you can actually see the year that, or the years after, different pollution regulations were put into place. So we can have a positive impact, you know, on our future. And so we do need to get out and vote. And that's what this Hill to Hill piece is about.
That's awesome. We'll definitely put the link, even though it will be better to go to one of the events that you're touring around with or attending, and they're screening it with the VR experience. We'll still put the link to the project in the notes, and anybody who can't get to one of those, definitely check it out, because it is a really cool thing. And I mean, I know even from like what Duct Tape Them Beer did with Bear's Ears, like not putting VR goggles on, but still being able to watch that VR experience they made for that was still spectacular. So,
yeah.
You know, you don't get the full immersive emotion, but right. Still pretty amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And then to add an exclamation point out that this really beautiful place where that couloir is in the Ruby Mountains just completely burned up on October 1st of this year. Oh. There was a massive wildfire that swept through there, and that canyon is just changed for a long time now. And it was started on private land just west of there. And so I don't know if they've determined what the cause is, but still just, you know, the rash of wildfires and hurricanes and everything we're seeing. But sad to know this place was burnt up. It's
getting worse and worse and bigger and like more frequent. There's no denying that.
Yeah. So everyone get out to vote for sure. A lot of states have, extended voting days, but definitely Tuesday, November 6th, get to your voting polls and make sure you vote for the outdoors in order to help prevent this sort of stuff from continuing to happen.
And if you happen to listen to this after November 6th, I hope you voted.
Yeah, and if you didn't, well, you're on my shit list.
Yeah, but, pick up the phone. Don't give up.
Totally.
Yeah, life's made up of those moments in between, so.
That's
absolutely.
Right. Well, so you have one other project that I know you did recently, which sounded pretty incredible, which was up in Greenland.
Yes, I got, my good friend Jimmy Chin called me up right before I went on this Arctic refuge trip this spring, and he said, "What are you doing when you get back from Alaska?" And I'm thinking,
he said, "Whatever you want to do, Jimmy."
Yeah, I know. There's a part of me was like, well, being a mom, staying home, because I'm so glad I got, the green light that I get to go up there. But he said, "Well, you want to go to Greenland and do this project with me," which was really funny because, he and Rob and I are all really close friends, and we have our own, relationships together as three of us since the Everest trip, and also like independently. So it was hilarious because I'm like, well, hold on. He goes, "I need to know right now. This is coming together." So I let me call Rob. So I called Rob, and Rob's like, "Well, you just tell Jimmy that you're busy, but I'm free and I'll dress in drag."
Love
That's
it.
what I am saying. Of course you should go. So I went to Greenland a couple days after I got back from the Arctic trip, and Jimmy was putting together a production piece for DJI, who was getting ready to release their new Mavic 2 Pro drone. And it was an incredible experience on a lot of levels. It was a very short trip because everybody's so busy, Jimmy especially. And we were trying to fit everything into the minimum amount of time that we had available. So we really had like 5 days up there in position to climb and ski something or a few things, ideally as much as we could in 5 days. And it was mid-May, so now that I know, I mean, I'd never been to Greenland before, and neither had Jimmy, so we will definitely go back at some point. It was incredible, but it felt a little bit on the late side. Anyway, we had to work really hard to get some stuff that we could ski, and it's really cool to see how it came together. There's a 5-minute piece out that you should put a link to, just because it's beautiful and inspiring, and my hats go off to all the people involved in the photography, which was everybody on the trip except for me. I was the only one who did not have a camera other than an iPhone.
So just playtime then.
Yeah, they had that active track going on the drone straight on you.
Yeah, there were several drones, and we accessed our areas by boat. So usually the drone operators are like, the best in the world, which doesn't necessarily equate to the best in the world at climbing and skiing mountains. And so they would be on the boat, and we would try and pick things that were kind of within their range, which is still a huge range. They can go a couple miles and a few thousand feet, but we can go farther. So it was tough to pick, what was right there that was worthy. And it was a really cool experience. And in the end, I think we came up with some really cool stuff, even though it was, probably like 10 o'clock at night on the last day for most of it. But you should check it out. It was just really rewarding. Anytime you go into the mountains with other really great friends that you trust, like everybody on that camera team that was on Slope. I worked with Britt Moma and Dirk Collins and Pablo Durana, who are just amazing people and friends. And, we had times when we would have to spend 3 or 4 hours wearing literally several down jackets and everything we had, waiting for just poised mid-slope, trying to get through a glacier, waiting for the fog to lift. And sometimes it didn't. And we went home, completely empty-handed. But we weren't empty-handed because we just had a blast. We just laughed and told jokes and shared all sorts of special foods that we'd brought, and just had the most amazing time spending that kind of time together. We hardly slept for 5 days because the sun was up almost 24 hours a day. But in the end, I had 3 drones in the air and 3 still cameras and 1 videographer on me on that final ski. And it's safe to say that there was this moment where I was like, holy cow, I hope I don't blow it. I've got the ski line in front of me that just looks really beautiful, and I just climbed up it, and I'm not nervous about the skiing, but what if, there's a lot riding on this. And then Dirk gave me this 20-second countdown, and there's a lot that can go through your mind in 20 seconds. And I found myself just thinking about love. I was like, love. I love doing this. I love being where I am. I love this place. I love all these people. And basically every second got another love, 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 until he said 1. And then I went, and I had this great ski. So I like to just leave people with this idea that if you're really truly doing what you love, then you're in the right place.
Yeah, and that's a good mantra too when you're maybe feeling a little bit a little shaky on what you're about to do, or a little bit more pressure than you'd like. Just, I'm in what I love to do. You've got this.
Yeah, like you said, a lot can go through your head in 20 seconds, and if every second it's just more love and appreciation and Stoke, then yeah, that's where you should be. But I think that is a testament to, your 5-day trip there is definitely a testament to determination and improvisation, which Greenland and Iceland and many of the high peaks of the world demand because of how quickly the weather can change, especially in those, northern Arctic islands, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. It can change really quickly. And it also is, the improvisation, you have to think really carefully and think on your feet. We climbed this couloir that one day didn't feel right and dug a pit, and I was like, I'm not going up there today. And we went back and we just watched the weather, and literally just froze just enough to give it a try another day. And another time, it didn't feel like it was, we were going to have to get someplace farther than the drones could get in order to get good snow. So what we figured was we just needed to go over this glacier, and the cold temperatures of glaciers would hold the snow in the couloir better up higher. So yeah, you've got to really improvise and be aware of your surroundings and in tune with your environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll put that link in the show notes as well. I watched it last night and was like, oh, look at this. They're just taking a boat right to the mountain. That's really lovely. And I put Greenland on my list now for places I need to go. So Kit, we're at our last question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, what does Stoke mean to you?
It means love for where you are and what you're doing at a high level.
Yeah. Basically, I feel like it's almost what you just described in those 20 seconds.
That's Stoke.
Exactly. And it's one of those things that you've got to create yourself. You know, people have it and they can share it infectiously, but only so much. If you really want to feel Stoke, you have to cultivate it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
I dig that.
Yeah. So we'll put all of those amazing things that we didn't rattle them off, but we did a lot of things.
So much through this show. It's like books and films and links and organizations. Like, there's a lot to follow up from here, listeners.
Thanks so much, Kit, for joining us. You're definitely a badass role model for everyone, but I really appreciate you being such a badass role model for us women out there as well.
Oh, thank you so much. I super appreciate it, Emily and Jonathan.
Yes, I'm not.
You're also a role model for Jonathan.
Not a woman, but you are certainly a badass role model. So, where can our listeners connect with you? Where do you like to hang out most on social and kind of have conversations?
Probably Instagram, but even that, I limit myself. I like it, and it's a great thing. It really is. It is great. But you'll find me taking sabbaticals here and there, and it's not because I'm still out there stoked what I'm doing. I just like to do what I do enough that I don't always like to talk about it. So I go through phases like that. So anyway, you'll find me there, and I'm there, at least I'm watching several times a week, and I post in at least once a week. So I will get back to you.
Well, that's totally fine and totally healthy. You shouldn't be on there all the time. So that's great. So it's at Kit D Ski.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for taking the time to chat with us tonight, and this was a great conversation. We will talk again soon, I'm sure.
I really enjoyed it. Have a great night, you guys.
You too.
Thanks, Kit. So that was our chat with Kit Deslauriers. She was fantastic. One of the things she mentioned was the Hill to Hill film project that she was working on with Brody Levin, a past guest of the Stokecast.
Episode 2. Check it out if you haven't.
Go check it. Small plug. But so unfortunately, there's only one more showing of that live, and that is in Bozeman, Montana. So we just wanted to shout that out. We'll have that in the show notes. It's at MAP Brewing, probably, on November 1st, which is Thursday. So check that out. There's like a Facebook event for it and everything. Should be pretty awesome. And it's obviously helping protect our winners, which is obviously the amazing organization that we've talked about a couple times on the podcast that are helping to advocate for environmental awareness and reducing climate change issues.
Right. So beyond November 1st, which is, just a day after this episode, right? So if you're listening to this beyond that, I'm sure you're going to be able to find that Hill to Hill piece somewhere online, somewhere on maybe Duct Tape Then Beer's website. And, YouTube, you can now see 180 degree, 360 degree video, pretty immersive experiences, very cool. But it's not as amazing and immersive as like if you're wearing those VR goggles. Maybe you've got like a Samsung Gear VR or some Google Cardboard or something, and you can experience it. But I know I'm going to try and get my hands on something because it sounds like just an incredible project. And I saw a teaser of just like a fly through on the canyon with like the
cool.
Man, it's so cool. Or not the canyon, the couloir.
Yeah.
Pretty rad project. So that was Hill to Hill. And like Emily said, it's by POW. So, or it's in association, right, with POW. So POW, Protect Our Winners, actually created, now we're coming up to these midterms, the so important voting period for us this year. and they created a voter's guide so that you know who in your area on your ballot is in support of being a climate champion, of in support of public lands. And you can grab that at, powactionfund.org, and then just click Take Action right in the nav, and then you'll see the thing that says like download voter guide. And it's really cool. You can just enter your address, and it'll just pull up your, everything from your federal to state ballots and governor and the questions and whatever, and kind of walk you through if you haven't been, reading up and in the know on those things. It'll kind of get you in the right mind space for November 6th.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, we're in Massachusetts, so we have early voting, so we can go to the polls before November 6th, but a lot of states do not have that. So just make sure you get out to vote. It's so, so important, especially right now in this day and age. And if you don't know, where you need to vote or where you can go early voting, literally you can just type it into Google and it'll let you know where your early voting place is and where your polling place is for the actual day of election day. One other thing I'll say is that I won't say what their names are, but all the rideshare companies are offering free rides that day. If you need to get to the polls, please utilize them. That's it.
Not dropping names.
They're not sponsoring us, so I'm not dropping their names.
No unpaid advertising.
Yeah.
So for sure, it's important just to get out there. And whether, I'd imagine if you're listening to the show that you are probably in support of public lands and, protecting the climate and all that. But even if you're not, even if you don't care, it's just important to get out and vote.
It's your duty as an American. If you're, in a different country, just sit back, relax,
hang out, enjoy the show.
Yeah, enjoy the terrible show that's on right now.
the poor excuse for reality TV that never ends.
No. Okay, so now we're getting a little crazy.
Yeah.
But
all right.
That's that. But we did want to just, as always, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for sharing the Stoke. And I think Jonathan has something he wants to share.
Yeah, I'm gonna read another review because this one hit me in the feels.
It's in your feels.
It got it right there, right in the center of the heart.
Where is your feels? The heart?
The heart, I think.
Okay. Cool.
I think. So this just simply titled "Stoked." Simon Fraser. Thank you, man. This podcast falls into a category of its own. It's not for entrepreneurs. It's not for photographers. It's not for creatives. It's not for athletes. It's for someone who feels a certain spark inside them. The spark that draws you toward adrenaline, pushes yourself beyond your comfort zone to try new things, take adventures, explore, and commit to a life that brings out the most real, authentic version of yourself.
Oof.
Amazing.
Oh
so well written. And so, man,
Simon, thank you. And everyone else who's been supporting, it's been awesome. Please continue to share the Stoke. We love you all. And continue to let us know how you're feeling about it all. Okay. That's it.
Is that all? Is that all?
I'm so bad at the ending. It's like, okay, you know what? That's it. Please vote if you're in the United States of America, and also share the Stoke.
And go follow Kit.
And go follow Kit.
And go follow Emily.
You have a lot of action items.
And go follow me.
Okay. And
so we can all continue talking and continue this conversation outside of just the hour-long little podcast every Wednesday, right? So
yes, let's do it.
That's the homework. All right. Talk to you later.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Emily Holland.
And I'm Jonathan Ronzio. We'll catch you next week with another episode of the Stokecast.